Warning: this story is intended for mature audiences with certain scenes containing harsh language alongside written depictions of violence, including self-harm. The Renmore Reaper, Part 1. Water of the Womb. In separation, tears run without sadness. Anger, the only thing filling these fractured souls. While families call their loved ones inside for dinner, stone-cold streets greet her empty stomach. The warmth of love, something she had yet to feel. It had been that way for years. People always say that blood is thicker than water, but often forget that it only applies to blood of the covenant and not of the womb. Sadly, this nameless girl had neither. Her life of pain and suffering, while certainly not the most glamorous, stood tall in the field of teaching. The strongest of warriors were not taught by striking sword to wooden post, but by having heavy practice blades break bones at slightest mistake. In a place that holds no remorse, only the strong survive. But this young girl was no warrior. She was nothing of note, a child of woe left to solitary to fend for herself in pure isolation. After all, it was the only enjoyable thing about that snow-coated prison many more wealthy than her called their home. While memories of that place were fading, one night played in her head over and over again. It was far too long ago to recall any exact details, and every attempt to pull some back only led to them slipping further out of reach. Traversing fragments of the past felt like running on an iced-over lake. The more she tried to speed up, the more cracks threatened the journey. She had to carefully guide her mind through each step, lest she plunge into the water below. The faint vision in her mind showed that of a young girl born without a heart, but it was not the snow-coated city she found herself in that proved too much for its subtle beat. It was something far worse than frostbite that took her heart. At least those long days of starvation were set to end once her older sister came back with food. Ripples in the memory didn't allow her to recount that wondrous taste of life, but she did recount an image of her sister looking at her with those loving eyes, an image that now made her chest feel empty and sick. There is no such thing as true happiness, not for a child left on her own, unwanted. Her parents didn't even give her a name when she was born. She was a mistake, along with her sister, so they threw them to the street before disappearing. Even those days weren't too bad, starving and barely surviving. At least back then she had the warmth of another. Too bad that warmth faded quicker than flame in endless white, for one day she woke up and her sister was nowhere to be found. She was gone like the light in her eyes, gone like the hope in her chest, gone like the smile on her face, and gone like the blood in her veins as she slid glass across her wrists one more time. The memories torturing this soul broke again as she tried to recall the simplest of things, like her sister's name. Was Eleanor the name she should be cursing? Or maybe it was Elena. Would she even recognize it if she were to hear it again? There were so many holes in her memory she couldn't even remember how she ended up here. All the memories of her younger years were from a place she never recalled leaving. A place far lower in temperature than Vela, the city resting on the coast of the Amethyst Sea that she now found herself in. Everyone here knew she was odd. Despite not talking much, she had even overheard others saying that she came from the wild and that she had no mother due to the way she seemingly appeared out of nowhere. But deep down she knew that was unlikely. She wasn't quite sure if you had to have a mother to exist, but everyone seemed to, so her hopes slowly diminished with time. There was also the possibility that the story spun by her sister about them being thrown to the street was just another lie. She may not have been the most well-informed, but one thing she had learned on the road is that no one is quite who they seem. It even applied to herself now that she thought of it. On the outside, people saw a shy little girl that didn't speak. They never saw the nights where anger enforced rule. The nights where she woke with busted lip and bloody knuckle. No one knew about the passenger in her head that spoke to her in the plains of silence. Maybe it was a good thing that she didn't know this mother of hers. Unimaginable, the things she would do if the truth was ever revealed. All of these thoughts piled into this young teen's mind as she continued to watch blood streak down her arm. This method wasn't as satisfying as she had hoped. She knew of a way much better, but didn't have enough energy to throw down tonight. She now realized that cutting was just a way to transform sorrow into pain. But this little girl had no sorrow left to shed. It was a feral hate that whipped around inside this being. So if cutting was a tool for sadness, she needed something much more to satisfy this hate. After all, one can rid themselves of all shortcomings.
You just have to do it proper,
said the voice in her head. The shard of glass in her hand turned to face her heart, itching to dig deep and search for worth hidden beneath. Unfortunately, she couldn't muster the courage. The vision would have to do for now. It played out vividly in her mind as her days went on, scrounging for food in the shadows as a volcano of hate hid beneath her skin. Although a few things did seem to calm that fury inside her, like the night she found herself lying under the stars in the forest as she watched the local wildlife. That nice, calm lake had slowly become her home. For the first time since her sister, she felt a smile. It came one cool night as she sat on an overhang above the water, when she spotted a rather large dog enjoying its refreshing hydration. That night turned into many. Each night the wild dog appeared, but never seemed to look her way. Regardless, it bothered her none. The sight of such a beautiful animal made her feel something new. She felt alone as always, but near the lake it felt like a relaxing loneliness, as long as she held the stars at bay. But those nights she found herself in Vela were different. In Vela, she always found herself in the Renmore district scavenging for food before looking for a quiet corner to lie down. Some nights were as silent as they get. Other nights you were forced to pretend you didn't hear someone getting run down and bladed on the street. One night she happened to be mere feet from a stabbing. A man who wasn't fast enough and got caught on the ends. She watched the faster man lay into him with some sort of large blade, and only once he had done enough, his eyes looked back and met with that of the young girl. Her yellow owl-like eyes stuck on watching blood drip off his knife. "Sorry you had to see that," he attempted to catch his breath. "Let this be a lesson to you, not to disrespect others," he huffed before a wicked laugh left him. Little did he know, he need not convince her to absolve his sins. She was not one to judge hatred. She understood disrespect cannot go unpunished. And while he may have thought this young girl was stunned by fear, she was far less scared and much more fascinated by the situation. She wondered what it would feel like, thought about it more times than she would admit. Eventually, years later, she had an interesting thought. Why did she choose to stay in the most vile district of the city? Would they kick her off the streets in northern Vela?
I told you why,
said the voice in her head.
You belong down here. Make something of yourself. I know you want this.
It loomed in her mind with sinister intent.
Can you feel that?
A voice manifested by pure hatred that never rested. It implanted visions of hurting herself and others into her mind at every turn. Certainly no life to live. This lonely child didn't even know her own age. Not that it mattered to her. Age was nothing to celebrate. Whether she had been alive for 16 or 17 years did not matter. The only thing that mattered were the wars she fought in and outside of her mind. Those scars that spanned her body, some from wild animal attacks, but most from fits of her own rage. She hadn't achieved anything in life, and the voice in her head constantly reminded her that she was nothing.
Weak, you're worthless.
This reminder went on for months, and while the forest may have calmed her mind, the surrounding berries only did so much for someone her size. She may have been young, but this little girl was a soon-to-be giant. Luckily for her, one night she happened to spot food left in a forgotten bando. She didn't question why or who had left it, because that mattered not. For if the choice was to starve or steal, there was only one correct answer. She refused to leave this world weak and worthless. She refused to end up like her sister, a faded memory of bitter night. Luckily for this young girl, she would soon get an opportunity to prove that she was something more. An opportunity to stop wishing for respect and start demanding it. But the road to legacy is not one so easily traveled. There were many obstacles in her way, and she knew that. But what she didn't know was what was lurking in the pitch that stormy night, nor the legacy it carried within its long, chilling blade. Thank you for watching. I put a lot of pain and love into creating this story. If you enjoyed it or my other works, please consider dropping a like, comment, or share. If you would like to support me further, please consider checking out my Patreon account. It goes a really long way to helping me continue to do what I love. Coming soon, the Renmore Reaper, Part 2. Yen.